This happened a few months ago, and honestly, I still catch myself thinking about it. My son's teacher, Mr. Harris, asked to meet me one afternoon. Now I'm used to these meetings being routine: grades, behavior, homework issues. Nothing too thrilling. But that day, as I sat in the little sunlit office, with the faint smell of chalk dust and coffee lingering in the air, I had no idea that this ordinary parent-teacher meeting would completely shift something in me. The room was small but cozy. Posters of famous authors, maps of the world, and shelves crammed with books created this intimate little bubble that somehow made me feel at ease, even though my heart was jittery. Mr. Harris greeted me with that professional, polite smile, the one teachers wear that makes you think they've got it all under control, even when they don't. I took a deep breath and sank into the chair opposite him, wondering what he could possibly want to talk about. We started as expected. He mentioned Jason's recent project on the solar system, how he'd been more creative than usual, how he had a knack for seeing connections other kids miss. I nodded, proud, but also slightly relieved. No discipline issues this time. But then there was a pause. That little flicker in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, told me something was coming. Something I hadn't anticipated. "I wanted to talk to you about something personal," he said quietly, leaning back in his chair. His tone wasn't alarming, but it was intimate in a way that caught me off guard. My mind raced. Was there a problem? Had Jason said something troubling? I braced myself. Instead, what he said next made me blink in disbelief. "Your son, he reminds me of someone I once knew. Someone who had a way of seeing the world differently, with curiosity and kindness. And it made me realize something about myself too." I paused, trying to process what he meant. He was speaking slowly, carefully, as though every word had been chosen, as though he was handing me a gift wrapped in vulnerability. We talked for over an hour. He didn't just discuss Jason's schoolwork or behavior. He shared memories of his own life, the challenges he faced as a younger teacher, the moments that had shaped him. And through it all, he looked at me, not just my face, but right into my eyes, with a respect and warmth that felt rare and grounding. I realized, somewhere in those quiet minutes, that this wasn't just about my son. It was about the humanity we all carry, the unexpected connections we make, and the subtle ways people can touch our hearts without even trying. As I left the classroom, walking through the quiet hallways of the school, sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt different. Lighter, but thoughtful. The encounter stayed with me, a small but persistent reminder that sometimes the stories we expect to hear are only the beginning. After that first meeting, I kept thinking about what Mr. Harris had said. His words lingered like a melody you can't quite place, gentle but insistent. I found myself walking into Jason's room more often, watching him draw, build, and imagine in ways I hadn't paid enough attention to before. It wasn't just pride anymore. It was a quiet sense of discovery, almost like seeing a world through a new lens. A week later, Mr. Harris called to ask if we could meet again. This time, he suggested we take a walk around the school grounds instead of sitting in the office. The afternoon was crisp, the sunlight golden, casting long shadows across the empty playground. There was something peaceful about the air, the faint scent of fallen leaves, and the way the school bell echoed distantly in the background. It felt like the world had slowed just for us. We walked side by side, talking about Jason's progress, but then the conversation shifted. He asked me about myself, about the life I led outside of being a mom. I hesitated at first. Most people rarely ask with genuine curiosity, and fewer still listen. But there was a sincerity in Mr. Harris's tone that disarmed me. I found myself opening up about the challenges I faced balancing work, home, and motherhood, the quiet fears I carried about my own limitations. He listened, not the polite, nodding kind of listening, but the kind that makes you feel like your words matter, that they leave a mark on someone else's heart. There was a pause, then a quiet confession from him, something personal about his own doubts as a teacher and as a person. It wasn't dramatic, not overly emotional. It was real. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes I forget how much we can learn from the young ones. Jason, he reminds me that curiosity isn't just for kids. It's a way to stay alive inside." I smiled, feeling a warmth that was unexpected, a connection that went beyond small talk or polite conversation. We continued our walk, the crunch of leaves beneath our feet marking the rhythm of our dialogue. Each word, each pause, seemed to deepen this fragile trust between us. It was strange and beautiful, an intimacy built not on romance, but on understanding, respect, and a shared recognition of life's complexities. By the time we returned to the entrance of the school, the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. I realized my chest felt lighter, my thoughts clearer. Something had shifted, not just in how I saw Mr. Harris, but in how I saw myself. Our conversations weren't just about my son. They were about noticing the small, often overlooked moments that define who we are and who we choose to be. As we said our goodbyes, I noticed a gentle hesitation in his eyes, a shared acknowledgement that what we were experiencing was rare and delicate. I left the school that day with a new sense of perspective. Connection isn't always loud, and sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that grow quietly, beneath the surface, like roots stretching through fertile soil. That evening, I sat by the window in the living room, watching the last rays of sun fade. Jason was upstairs, lost in his world of drawings and imagination, oblivious to the quiet evolution happening between his teacher and me. I felt a profound gratitude, not only for my son, but for the unexpected human bonds that remind us life can still surprise us, even when we think we've seen it all. A few weeks passed, and our meetings became something I quietly looked forward to. Not in a dramatic way, no secret rendezvous or scandal, but in the sense that they became a rare space where I could breathe, think, and feel seen. Each time I entered the school, the familiar smell of books and polished floors, the distant echoes of children laughing, I felt a gentle anticipation. One afternoon, Mr. Harris suggested we meet in the library. The room was quiet, with soft sunlight spilling through tall windows, dust motes floating lazily in the beams. Rows of books created little corridors of stillness, and the air had that comforting mix of paper and ink. It was intimate, almost private, despite being in a public space. We sat across from each other at a small wooden table. Jason's progress was the starting point, of course, but soon we drifted into more personal territory again. He told me about his father, who had passed when he was young, and how teaching had been both a refuge and a challenge. I shared memories of my own childhood, the pressures of work, the quiet moments of fear and hope as a mother. There was a delicate rhythm to our conversation, neither rushed nor forced, each pause holding space for reflection. I found myself noticing small details about him. The way his hands moved when he talked, the subtle crinkle at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, the sincerity in his voice. He wasn't just a teacher. He was someone who had lived, someone who had carried loss and hope together, and somehow he had chosen to approach life with gentleness and attentiveness. At one point, he leaned back and let out a small laugh, a little embarrassed. "You know, I've met a lot of parents over the years," he said, "but rarely do I meet someone who listens the way you do, really listens." I felt a warmth spread across my chest. It wasn't flattery. It was recognition, mutual and honest. I realized that in listening to him, I was discovering parts of myself I had tucked away. There was courage in vulnerability, in letting someone see the cracks as well as the polished edges. We ended up talking for hours, the library around us slowly emptying as the afternoon waned. There was a comfort in the silence that settled after certain thoughts were shared, the kind of silence that isn't awkward but nourishing. When it was time to leave, we walked together toward the school entrance. The sun was lower now, golden and soft, washing the walls in a warm glow. "Thank you," he said quietly, almost as if he feared the words would vanish if spoken too loudly. "For this, for everything." I smiled, feeling the sincerity behind his tone. "No," I said softly. "Thank you for reminding me it's okay to notice, to feel, to connect." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. There was a quiet exhilaration in it, a sense that life had opened a small door for me, one that I hadn't even known existed. I realized that the bond we were forming wasn't about romantic notions, though there was a gentle tension in our connection. It was about understanding, about human empathy, and about the unexpected ways people can touch our lives when we least expect it. As I tucked Jason in that evening, I thought about Mr. Harris again, not just as my son's teacher, but as someone who had opened a window in my world, allowing light and reflection to enter. I knew that this journey, quiet and unassuming as it seemed, was changing me. And somehow, I was beginning to see that perhaps the most meaningful experiences in life are the ones that arrive softly, unexpectedly, and leave us profoundly altered. Over the following weeks, the rhythm of our conversations became something steady and grounding in my life. I started noticing little shifts in myself, patience, awareness, and an unexpected joy in ordinary moments. Even Jason seemed brighter, more confident, though, of course, he never knew the quiet catalyst behind it all. One late afternoon, Mr. Harris asked if I could stay after school for a few minutes. The hallways were almost empty, and the golden light from the windows painted long, soft shadows on the floors. I felt a familiar flutter in my chest, a mix of curiosity, anticipation, and a gentle nervousness. We walked slowly to the courtyard, where a few leaves spiraled down from the trees. It was peaceful, almost magical, and I realized how much I had come to cherish these moments of quiet reflection with him. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft and deliberate, "about how quickly time passes, how fleeting some connections can be, and I wanted to tell you, you've made a real difference, not just for Jason, but for me too." His words caught me off guard. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't noticed before, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. In that moment, I understood that what we had shared wasn't just about my son's growth or his success in school. It was about human connection, about recognizing the impact we have on each other's lives, often without realizing it. We stood in silence for a few moments, the world around us muted. It wasn't romantic in the dramatic sense, but it was deeply intimate. Our hands brushed lightly as we both reached for the small gate to leave the courtyard. The contact sent a subtle shiver of awareness through me, a reminder that connection can be tender, unexpected, and profoundly human. As I left the school that day, walking through the quiet streets with the evening sky glowing in shades of rose and violet, I felt a sense of completeness. There was no grand declaration, no dramatic twist, just a quiet, enduring truth. We had found something rare, a mutual respect and understanding that enriched both our lives. At home, I sat by the window and reflected on the past weeks. I thought about Jason, who unknowingly brought us together, about Mr. Harris, who had reminded me of the beauty in attentive listening and presence, and about myself, realizing that life could still surprise me with moments of connection that are quietly transformative. Sometimes, I catch myself smiling at the memory of our conversations, the sound of his voice, the way he had the patience to listen and the courage to share. It's a reminder that even in ordinary routines, school meetings, daily walks, quiet afternoons, extraordinary human experiences can happen. And often they arrive when we least expect them, leaving a mark on our hearts that lingers long after the moment has passed. I've come to understand that these moments, these subtle but profound connections, are what make life rich and meaningful. And as I watched Jason play in the yard, carefree and full of wonder, I realized that the unexpected bond with his teacher has changed more than just our afternoons at school. It has changed how I see the world, how I see people and how deeply I can feel. And maybe that's the real lesson, that life's surprises, the ones that touch us most profoundly, often come quietly, without fanfare, and stay with us forever.